Myself, Hemashri, Department of Pharmacy Practice, working as a professor in A.M. Reddy Memorial College of Pharmacy. Today we are discussing about introduction to pharmacovigilance. So, why the pharmacovigilance? The information collected during the pre-marketing phase of a medical drug is inevitably incomplete with regard to possible adverse reactions. Tests in animals are insufficiently predictive of human safety. In clinical trials, patients are selected and limited in number. The conditions of use differ from those in clinical practice, and the duration of the trials is limited. Information about rare but the serious adverse reactions, chronic toxicity, use in special groups such as children, the elderly, or pregnant women, or drug interactions is often incomplete or not available. Pharmacovigilance is needed in every country because there are differences between countries and even regions with countries in the occurrence of adverse drug reactions and other drug related problems. This may be because of differences in drug production, distribution, and use, such as examples like indications, dose availability, genetics, diet, traditions of people, pharmaceutical quality and compositions of locally produced pharmaceutical products, the use of non orthodox drugs such as herbal remedies, which may pose special toxicological problems which used alone or in combination with other drugs. Data derived from within the country or region may have greater relevance and educational value and may encourage national regularity decision making. When information from the region itself is not available, it may take longer before a problem becomes known to the drug regulatory authorities, physicians, pharmacists, patients, and the pharmaceutical companies. When coming to the definition and aims of the pharmacovigilance, pharmacovigilance is science of detection, assessment, reporting, and prevention of adverse drug reactions to drugs. Major aims of pharmacovigilance are early detection of hitherto unknown adverse drug reactions and interactions, detection of increased in frequency of adverse drug reactions, identification of risk factors and possible mechanisms underlying adverse drug reactions, estimation of quantitative aspects of benefit or risk analysis, and dissemination of information needed to improve drug prescribing and regulation. The ultimate goals of pharmacovigilance are the rational and safe use of medical drugs, the assessment and communication of the risks and benefits of drugs on the market, and educating and informing the patients or consumers. Basic steps in setting up a pharmacovigilance center: make contact with the health authorities and with local and regional and national institutions and groups working in clinical medicine, pharmacology, toxicology, outlining the importance of the project and its purpose. Design a reporting form and start collecting data by distributing it to the hospital departments, family practitioners, etc. Produce printed material to inform health professionals about definitions, aims, and methods of the pharmacovigilance system. Create the center, staff accommodation, phone, word, word processor, database management, capability, bibliography, etc. Take care of education of pharmacovigilance staff with regard, for example, to collect data collection and verification, interpreting and coding of adverse reactions descriptions, coding of drugs, case casualty assessment, signal detection, risk management. Establish a database, administrative system for the storage and retrieval of data. 7. Organize meetings in hospitals, academia, and professional associations explaining the principles and demands of pharmacovigilance and the importance of reporting. Promote the importance of reporting adverse drug reactions through medical journals, other professionals' publications, and communications activities. And ninth is maintain contact with the international institutions working in pharmacovigilance. Example, the World Health Organization, Department of Essential Drug and Medicines Policy, Geneva, and the Uppsala Monitoring Center, Sweden. Reporting of adverse drug reactions. Spontaneous reporting. A regional or countrywide system for the reporting of suspected adverse drug reactions. It is currently major source of information in pharmacovigilance. Reporting form. A notification relating to a patient with an adverse medical event suspected to be induced by medicine. A case report should, as a minimum to aim at, contain information on the following elements: the patient, age, sex, and brief medical history, which is relevant, and in some countries, ethnic origin may need to be specified. Adverse event is description, nature, localization, severity, characteristics, results of investigations and tests, start date, course, and outcome. And suspected drugs: name, brand or ingredient name plus manufacturer, dose, route of administration, start or stop dates, indications for use with a particular drug, examples, vaccines, and batch number is important. All other drugs used, including self-medication, names, doses, routes, start or stop dates must be taken. Risk factors are impaired renal functions, previous exposure to suspected drugs, previous allergies, and social drug use. And sixth is name and address of reporters to be considered confidential and to be used only for data verification, completion, and case follow-up. Reporting should be as easy and cheap as possible. Suspected adverse drug reactions reporting form. Here it includes, it's like this. It contains patient information, suspected adverse reactions. They are mentioning the date of reaction stated and date of recovery, describe reactions, example. All the informations should be mentioned here. Next, patient information. Patient initials. A reporter should only mention the initials of a patient instead of the full name. For example, Madhu Gupta should be written as MG. Age at time of event or date of birth. A reporter must report either the date of birth or age of the patient at the time the event or reaction occurred. Sex or gender. A reporter must mention the gender of the patient. Weight. The weight of the patient should be in kilograms. Suspected adverse drug reaction. Date of reaction started. A reporter must report the date on which the reaction was first observed. And date of recovery, if the reaction recovered, the date on which the reaction recovered should be reported. Describe reactions. A reporter must briefly describe the event in terms of nature, localization, etc. For example, patient developed erytheromatous maculopapular rash over upper and lower limbs. Suspected medications. The details of the suspected medications, such as the drug name, brand or generic name, manufacturer, batch number or lot number, expiry date, dose used, route used, frequency, date of therapy started and stopped, and indication of the use must be provided by the reporter. D-challenge details. A reporter must report the status of D-challenge as yes if reaction abated or reduced after D-challenge. No if reaction did not abated after D-challenge. Unknown if information on D-challenge is not confirmed or not known. Not applicable or not applicable if D-challenge is not possible, as in case of anaphylaxis, life-threatening events, anesthetic drugs, or where a single dose is given. Reduced dose. If the dose at which the reaction occurred is reduced. Note, also mention the reduced dose. Rechallenge details. A reporter must report the status of rechallenge as yes if reaction reappeared after rechallenge. No if reaction did not appear after rechallenge. Unknown if the information or rechallenge is not confirmed or not known. Not acceptable if the rechallenge is not applicable, as in the case of injections. Reintroduced dose. If the dose is reintroduced, it is a reduced dose or it is the same dose at which adverse event occurred initially. Concomitant drugs. A reporter should include all the details of the concomitant drugs, including self-medication, over-the-counter medication, we are calling it as OTC in short, and herbal remedies with the therapy dates. Start and stop date must be included. Relevant tests or laboratory data. A reporter must mention any laboratory data, if available, relevant to the adverse event that occurred. Other relevant histories are: the reporter must mention any relevant history pertaining to the patient, including pre-existing medical conditions such as allergies, pregnancy, smoking, alcohol use, hepatic or renal dysfunctions. Seriousness of the reaction. If any event is serious in nature, a reporter must select the appropriate reason for seriousness. Death. If the patient died due to the adverse event. Life threatening. If a patient was at substantial risk of dying because of the adverse event. Hospitalization or prolonged. If the adverse event led to hospitalization or increased the hospital stay of the patient. And disability. If an adverse event resulted in a substantial disruption of a person's ability to conduct normal life functions. Congenital anomaly. If exposure of the drug prior to the conception or during the pregnancy may have resulted in an adverse outcome in the child. Required intervention to prevent permanent impairment or damage. If medical or surgical intervention was necessary to preclude permanent impairment of a body function or prevent permanent damage to a body structure. Others are when the event does not fit the other outcome, but the event may put the patient at a risk and may require medical or surgical intervention to prevent one of the other outcomes. Examples include serious blood dyscrasias, like blood disorders, or seizures convulsions that do not result in hospitalization, development of drug dependence or drug abuse. 15th, outcomes. The reporter must tick the outcomes of the event as fatal if the patient dies due to the adverse event, continuing if the patient is continuing to have the symptoms of the adverse event which occurred, recovering if the patient is recovering from the existing adverse event, recovered if the patient has recovered from the event, unknown if the outcome is not. Coming to the reporter, name and professional address must be mentioned. A reporter must mention his name and professional address on the form. The identity of the reporter will be maintained confidential. Casualty assessment. The reporter must perform the casualty assessment. Date of report. Mention the date on which he or she reported the adverse event. Who can report? Any healthcare professionals, doctors including dentists, nurses, pharmacists and recently consumers also. Where to report? Please return the completed form to the nearest Adverse Drug Reaction Monitoring Center or National Coordinating Center. A list of nationwide AMCs is available at this link. What happens to the submitted information? Information provided in this form is handled in strict confidence. The casualty assessment is carried out at Adverse Drug Reaction Monitoring Center AMCs by using World Health Organization UMC scale. The analyzed forms are forwarded to the National Coordinating Center through the ADR database. Finally, the data is analyzed and forwarded to the Global Pharmacovigilance database managed by World Health Organization Uppsala Monitoring Center in Sweden. The reporter are periodically reviewed by the National Coordinating Center PVPI. The information generated on the basis of these reports helps in the continuing assessment of the benefit-risk ratio of medicines. The information is submitted to the steering committee of the PVPI constituted by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. The committee is entrusted with the responsibility to review the data and suggest any interventions that may be required. Assessment of case reports. Quality of the documentation must be assessed, coding, and if it is a new drug and unknown reactions and serious reactions. Quality of documentation. Example, completeness and integrity of the data, quality of diagnosis and follow-up. Coding is the drug name should be registered in systematic way. For example, by using the World Health Organization Drug Dictionary, which is based on the INN nomenclature and the ATC classification. For the coding of adverse drug event, the World Health Organization adverse reaction terminology or another internationally recognized terminology, MedDRA, should be used. Relevance with the regard to the detection of new reactions, drug regulations, or scientific or educational values. The following questions especially may be asked. New drug means products on the market less than 5 years are usually considered as new drugs. And unknown reactions, that is not included in the approved summary of the product characteristics or unlabeled. Also important is whether the reaction is described in the literature. Example, National Drug Formulary, Martindale, Mailer's side effects of drugs. Ask the Uppsala Monitoring Center for books and other information sources. Serious reactions. Identification of the duplicate reports. Certain characteristics of a case, such as gender, age, and date of birth, dates of drug exposure, etc., may be used to identify duplicate reporting. Casualty assessment. With few exceptions, case reports describe suspected adverse drug reactions. Various approaches have been developed for the structured determination of the likelihood of a causal relationship between drug exposure and the adverse event. For example, World Health Organization Drug Monitoring Program, the European Commission, and the French National Pharmacovigilance Program. These systems are largely based on four considerations: the association and the time between drug administration and event, pharmacology, including current knowledge of the nature and frequency of adverse drug reactions, medical or pharmacological plausibility, signs and symptoms, laboratory tests and pathological findings and mechanisms, likelihood or exclusion of other causes. Advice about reporting. Report adverse experiences with the medications. Report serious adverse reactions. A reaction is serious when a patient outcome is death, life-threatening, hospitalization, disability, required intervention to prevent permanent impairment or damage. Report even if you are not certain the product caused adverse reaction. You do not have all the details. However, point number 1, 5, 7, 8, 11, 15, 16, 18 are essentially required. Casualty categories. The casualty categories described by the Uppsala Monitoring Center are as follows. Certain, a clinical event including laboratory test abnormality occurring in a plausible time relationship to drug administration and which cannot be explained by the concurrent disease or other drugs or chemicals. The response to withdrawal of the drug, means it's a D challenge, should be clinically plausible. The event must be definitive pharmacologically or phenomenologically using a satisfactory rechallenge procedure if necessary. Probable or likely. A clinical event including laboratory test abnormality with a reasonable time sequence to administration of the drug, unlikely to be attributed to concurrent disease or other drugs or chemicals, and which follows a clinically reasonable response on withdrawal. Rechallenge information is not required to fulfill this definition. Possible. A clinical event including laboratory test abnormality with a reasonable time sequence to administration of the drug, but which could also be explained by concurrent disease or other drugs of chemicals. Information on the drug withdrawal may be lacking or unclear. Unlikely, we can say a clinical event including laboratory test abnormality with a temporal relationship to the drug administration, which makes a causal relationship improbable and in which other drugs, chemicals, or underlying diseases provide plausible explanation. Conditional or unclassified. A clinical event including laboratory test abnormality reported as an adverse reaction about which more data is essential for a proper assessment or the additional data is under examination. Unaccessible or unclassifiable. A report suggesting an adverse drug reaction which cannot be judged because information is insufficient or contradictory and which cannot be supplemented or verified. As a step towards harmonization in the drug regulation in the countries of European Union, the EU Pharmacovigilance Working Parties proposed the following three casualty categories. Category A, B and O. Category A contains reports including good reasons and sufficient documentation to assume a causal relationship in the sense of plausible, conceivable, likely, but not necessarily highly probable. Category B, it shows reports containing sufficient information to accept the possibility of a casual relationship in the same sense of not impossible and not like unlikely, although the connection is uncertain and maybe even doubtful. Example, because of missing data, insufficient evidence, or the possibility of another explanation. Category O, reports where causality is for one or another reason not accessible. Example, because of the missing or conflicting data. This is the medicine side effect reporting form for consumers. You can see this one. Patient details, health information, details of persons reporting side effects, death of medicine or taken. Next, about the side effects, when the side effect started, when it stopped, all these details, how the bad was the side effect. So all this information must be given in this particular form. So this must be submitted to the authority. And also we are going to discuss about adverse drug reactions. So here, according to World Health Organization 1972, a response to a drug which is noxious and unintended and which occurs at doses normally used in man for prophylaxis, diagnosis or therapy of disease or for the medication of physiological function. Definitions, adverse event is any untoward medical occurrence that may present during treatment with the pharmaceutical product but which does not necessarily have a causal relationship with the treatment. And coming to the adverse drug reaction, any noxious change which is suspected to be due to a drug. Here drug is involved, occurs at doses normally used in men, requires treatment or decrease in the dose or indicates caution in future use of the same drug. Therefore, an adverse drug reaction is an adverse event with a causal link to a drug. Classification of adverse drug reactions depending on onset of event, type of reaction, severity and others. Onset of event includes acute means less than 60 minutes, subacute means 1 to 24 hours and latent is greater than 2 days. And coming to type of reactions, there are type A augmented, B is bizarre and C is chemical, D is delayed, E is exact, F means familial, G is genotoxicity, H is hypersensitivity and U is unclassified. Severity comes under minor, moderate, severe, lethal IDRs. And others are side effects, secondary effects, toxic effects, intolerance, idiosyncrasy, drug allergy, photosensitivity, drug dependence, drug withdrawal reactions, and teratogenicity, mutagenicity, carcinogenicity, and drug-induced diseases. These are the different types of classifications of ADRs. So when coming to the classification of ADRs, it is classified by the Wilson Brown. So here you can see the different types of classifications. This is the picture regarding types of adverse reactions. And coming to the each individual explanation, augmented means dose related. He features are common related to the pharmacological action of the drug, exaggerated pharmacological response, and predictable and low mortality. Example, dry mouth with tricyclic antidepressants, respiratory depression with the opioids, and bleeding with the warfarin. You can see this picture. Management, reduce dose or withhold the drug. Consider effects of the concomitant therapy. Bizarre, non-dose related. Features are uncommon, not related to the pharmacological action of the drug, unpredictable and high mortality. And next examples are immunological reactions, anaphylaxis to the penicillin. So when patients are taking penicillin, if they are allergic to penicillin, so they may get the anaphylactic shock. We are calling it as anaphylactic shock. Idiosyncratic reactions are malignant hypothermia with the general anesthetics. Management, withhold and avoid in future. Chronic, type C, dose related and time related. Features are uncommon, related to the cumulative doses. Examples are hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis suppression by corticosteroids, osteonecrosis of the jaw with the biphosphonate. You can see the picture. Management is reduce dose or use an alternative day therapy. Withdrawal may have to be prolonged. Delayed. It's type D, time related. Features are uncommon, usually dose related, occurs or becomes apparent sometimes after the use of the drug. Example, carcinogenesis, teratogenesis, and tardive dyskinesia and leukopenia with the lomustine. Management are often intractable. Type E, end of use, withdrawal. Features are uncommon, occur soon after withdrawal of the drug. So examples are withdrawal syndrome with the opiates or benzodiazepines. Examples are insomnia and anxiety. Management are reintroduce drug and withdraw slowly. Failure, type F, unexpected failure of the therapy. Features are common, dose related, often caused by drug interactions. Examples are inadequate doses of an oral contraceptive which used with the enzyme inducer, resistance to the antimicrobial agents. Managements are increased dosage, consider effects of the concomitant therapy. Classification of ADs depending on severity. Minor ADs, there is no therapy, antidote or prolongation of the hospitalization is required. Modern ADs requires change in drug therapy, specific treatment or prolongs hospital stay by at least 1 day. Severe ADRs, potentially life-threatening causes, permanent damage or requires intensive medical treatment. Lethal, it's directly or indirectly contribute to the death of the patient. Side effects. Drug discovery. Occasionally, adverse effects may be exploited to develop an entirely new indication of a drug. For example, you can see unwanted hair growth during minoxidil treatment of severely hypertensive patients. So, there is a development of new drug for the hair growth. And sildenafil was initially developed as an anti-anginal, but its effect to alleviate erectile dysfunction, a new drug indication in erectile tissue. Like such as sulfonamides used for antibacterials were found to produce hypoglycemia and acidosis as a side effects. Development of hypoglycic sulfonylureas and carbonic anhydrase inhibitors, estrogenamide. Side effects. Unwanted but often unavoidable pharmacodynamic effects that occur at a therapeutic doses. Predicted from the pharmacological profile of a drug, known to occur in a given percentage of a drug recipient. Side effects examples are side effects based on the therapeutic effect. Atropine, pre-anesthetic causes dryness of mouth. Okay, and side effects based on the different actions. Promethazine, anti-allergic, causes sedation. And depending on the context, codeine, it's an anti-tissue, causes constipation. So used in a traveler's diarrhea. Secondary effects. Indirect consequences of the primary action of a drug. Examples are tetracyclines suppress the bacterial flora, so superinfections may cause. Corticosteroids weakens the host defense, activation of the latent tuberculosis. Toxic effects. Results of excessive pharmacological action of a drug due to overdoses or prolonged use. Overdoses may be absolute, accidental or homicidal or suicidal, and relative gentamicin in renal failure. Results from extension of the therapeutic effects. Barbiturates causes coma, digoxin causes complete AV block, and heparin causes bleeding. And functional alterations may occur. Atropine shows delirium. Drug-induced tissue damage. Paracetamol causes hepatic necrosis. Intolerance. Appearance of characteristics toxic effects of a drug in an individual at therapeutic doses. Converse of tolerance indicates a low threshold of the individual. Examples are carbamazepine few doses causes ataxia in some individuals. Idiosyncrasy. Genetically determined abnormally reactivity to a chemicals. Certain bizarre drug effects due to peculiarities of an individual for which no definitive genotype has been described are also included. Examples, barbiturates, excitement and mental confusion in some individuals. Drug dependence. Drug abuse. Use of a drug by self-medication in a manner and amount that deviates from the approved medical and social pattern in a given culture at a given time. Drug addiction. Compulsive drug use characterized by overwhelming involvement with the use of drugs. And next one, drug habituation. Less intensive involvement with the drug, withdrawal produces only mild discomfort. Photosensitivity. There are two types, phototoxicity and photoallergic. Phototoxic is drug or its metabolite accumulates in the skin, absorbs light and undergoes photochemical reaction, resulting in the local tissue damage, like such as sunburn, like that is erythema, edema, blistering, or hyperpigmentation. Example: tetracyclines and tar products, nalixic acid, fluoroquinolones, and sulfones, etc. Photoallergic drugs and its metabolites induces cell-mediated immune response, which, on exposure to the light, longer wavelength light, produces a papular or eczematous contact dermatitis-like picture. Example: sulfonamides, sulfonyl ureas, griseofulvin, and chloroquine and chlorpromazine. Drug allergies. Immunologically mediated reactions producing stereotype symptoms unrelated to the pharmacodynamic profile of the drug generally occurs even with the much smaller doses, also called drug hypersensitivity. So there are types, four types are there. Type 1, immediate anaphylactic, IgE, penicillin causes anaphylactic shock. Type 2 is cytotoxic antibody, IgG and IgM involved. These are next one, methyl dopa, hemolytic anemia. And type 3 is serum sickness, antigen antibody complex. Example: procyanamide causes induced lupus. These are comes under humoral immunity. And cell mediated immunity, type 4 comes under the cell mediated immunity, delayed hypersensitivity reactions. Example: contact dermatitis. Drug withdrawal reactions. Sudden interruption of the therapy with certain drugs results in adverse consequences, mostly in the form of worsening of the clinical conditions for which the drug was being used. Examples are corticosteroids, adrenal insufficiency, beta blockers, worsening of angina, and clonidine, severe hypertension. Mutagenicity and carcinogenicity. Capacity of a drug to cause genetic defects and cancer respectively. Chemical carcinogens generally take several 10 to 40 years to develop. Examples: anti-cancer drugs, radioisotopes, estrogens, and tobacco. Drug-induced disease, also called laterogenic physician, include diseases, functional disturbances caused by drugs which persist even after the offending drug has been withdrawn and largely eliminated. Examples are salicylates, corticosteroids causes peptic ulcer, phenothiazines and other antipsychotics causes Parkinsonism, and isoniazid causes hepatitis, and hadrogen causes DLE. Thank you. This is the end of the topic.